Welcome to Mastering Agility. If you want to listen to authentic conversations with the most inspiring guests, find like-minded people in the Mastering Agility Discord community, or both online and face-to-face events, this is the platform for you. Grab a drink, sit back, and join professional Scrum trainers Sander Dorr, Jim Sammons, and their guests in an all-new episode.
Martijn, welcome to the Mastering Agility podcast. Give us a little introduction. What do you do? Who are you? Where do you come from?
So, I hope to give useful insights to the rest. So maybe I'll take a little more time for this story, because I find usually on podcasts I want to know, is this person I'm going to talk to relevant to me? So can I do 2 minutes? Is that okay?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah?
Go ahead.
All right, okay. Martijn Versteeg. I have a background in organizational psychology and computer science, which kind of merges into product, I found out later. And it's also not a bad background for any agile roles. Aside from that, have always been a sports coach for rowing. Started actually here where we are recording in Hilversum, and ended in as the national head coach for rowing of Singapore. So that was a pretty fun first, well, I think that would be qualifying as first job. Aside from that, when I got in Singapore, I actually learned a couple of things that I thought were amazing. One, working cross-cultural, which is just a must if you want to work in IT anywhere. Two, the story of Singapore was super inspiring to me. I loved learning that a country can go from, well, let's say Pirate Harbor to first world city in like 4 decades. And one of the things that they focused on was education. And why am I telling that? Is because that sparked my idea for my own first company. I had an education technology company, built that up in 5 years, had the roller coaster that goes with scaling a company, and a lot of screw ups, by the way, which I think are more interesting to talk about than the end. But the end we were acquired was super cool. Stayed on at interim, and over time found that I actually I got that lonely at the top feeling. At one point you reach, like if you're specifically in a scale up, you don't have that many other people who are in the lead. So I started forming this group for myself. It was called a peer group. And that's one thing that has exploded. It started as a tool for myself, but I now, in the past year, spent most of my time doing peer groups for people that either have a leadership role in product or in tech. And last year, I even experimented a little bit with CFOs, COOs, and CEOs. Those groups have grown across Europe. So I have groups live in Berlin, I have group lives in the UK, and I have groups here in the Netherlands, and a couple of remotes. And I'm not promoting that because we're at capacity. I have a young child I cannot handle anymore, but I hope to share some insights. So if you hear me talking about many different companies, this is where it comes from. I have those sessions. We learn a lot from each other, and even though I will omit all the companies and the specific market details, I hope to share some of the insights. But because that was just a really cool thing.
Nice, that's awesome. There are so many things to dive into. But what was that spark for you that kind of was a catalyst for you to start that company?
Yeah. So the company, we're talking about the education company or the peer group?
Either.
All right. So for education, I really saw in Singapore that Singapore said, we want to transition to becoming world class, and they focused on education. And it worked. So I said to myself, if education is such a cornerstone, let's see if we can help out education here in my own country, in the Netherlands, but also maybe even in Europe. And that has always remained true. I actually learned that a lot of the things that were second nature to me and my co-founder, going to people and actually asking them what they needed instead of having the arrogance of thinking that you have the solution, that turned out to be discovery in product management. So I rolled into product management way from an experience thing, and later reading books and being,
that sounds familiar.
That sounds pretty familiar. So that is company number one. Number two, it was basically, I got a lot of value in having this group of 7 people who I could spar with, who really understood my challenges, but also could honestly give me the things that I was doing wrong and that I might not see and might not hear, because you always feel the same in a leadership position, but your directs don't necessarily feel that. This is the tip number one for any leaders listening. Even if you feel super approachable, it's not the same as the people that report to you feeling the same thing. And I got so much value that I got more and more coaching requests. But I don't like one-on-one coaching that much, because at one point I was like verbatim doing the same things. So I said, maybe this is not the key. Maybe the key is just copy pasting this solution I have and see if I can put up masterminds for many people. That's the second one.
How did you find out about the approachability? Because if you're not that approachable, then I can imagine it's really hard for people to actually approach you and say, hey, you're not approachable.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, two-layered answer. On the one hand, I think this is something I already learned as a sports coach, because as a sports coach, I was always coaching the kids who were, when I was 18, I was coaching the 16-year-olds. So you still feel the same. But I could tell that they were not always giving me the things back. And I could also see, like, non-verbally, that people are not always as open. So I think one of the cues is non-verbally. The second, let me see if I can put a good phrase on that. So what I really strongly believe in is we fall into patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I just experiment with what happens if I break the pattern. I was playing with the idea to sit on your seat just for fun, because I noticed in other recordings you always sit there. Because it changes things. There was no immediate reason, but this was one of the things that jumped in my mind. Oh, that would be fun. And I've literally done that when I had my own company, but I've also suggested this to many leaders.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, yeah, but they don't honestly speak to me. And I'm in this office and they're in this fantastic chair and you're in that shitty B seat. So I said, how about next time you want honest feedback, go sit in the shitty B seat. Yeah. And I always got positive feedback. So I think it's two-layered. One, pay attention to the nonverbal. Two, break the patterns that build over time.
What refrained you from sitting in this seat?
There was no purpose here, because I think there's already a very open atmosphere in this podcast. I think we that's one of the things. There's nothing to be broken here. I think we can already have an open, interesting conversation.
Well, that's definitely true. Jim, I see you nodding, smiling.
Well, I mean, I was just going to tell him that you probably would have just sat on his lap and we would have had a different start to the podcast. But, and I'm just laughing at the word broken, right? Like, I'm sure that we would both say we're broken in different ways. Maybe it might not come out in the next 45 minutes, but we can get better. So I think it's interesting about changing.
Sorry. What I want to dive on this word broken. What does it mean?
I don't know what. I mean, you said it first. So I like the Japanese idea of kintsugi, which is taking something that is traditionally broken and making it a artistic and valuable part of the piece. So they'll repair a piece of pottery with gold leaf and actually accentuate the brokenness to return the thing to functionality while also adding beauty, right? So I think Sander and I, we do what we do because if everything was perfect, we would be bored and we would not be employed. It's about seeing shared growth and shared brokenness, if you want, or room for improvement as a normal, positive human thing, I think.
Yeah. I'm reconsidering that I might have not chosen the word broken. But I want to dive into it because I hear you say there's beauty in then fixing things and maybe even iterating on it. The question is, how much more beautiful does it get if you smash that vase again and then again and then again? I think you'd end up with just gold, right?
Well, that's assuming that you're actively breaking something.
That's
and I
fair.
think now we're discussing something that was already broken. Yeah. Right, and that's where a lot of company sparks or product sparks actually emerge from, either something that's broken, from frustration, from market gaps, from all these kind of things. So I guess that is the same for the examples that you just pulled up, either the learning company Singapore or these kind of learning groups in these journeys. Like there is a market gap, but that doesn't mean that there's necessarily something that's broken. There's just a different approach to an already existing product.
I think now I'm thinking about this word. When I'm working with the groups, one of the themes has often come up, and I do sneakily do some one-on-one coaching. I think usually it's not broken if something isn't working, but it is no longer functional. And the difference is, if you look at like classic startup having to grow into scale-up, right? Mm-hmm. In the beginning, it's pretty useful if leadership just comes up with the answers. It's pretty functional. It can work really well. Mm-hmm. But then at one point, the leadership needs to let go of trying to have all the answers because the scope is getting too big. Whether you talk just within product and engineering or in the company as a whole, I think that is one of the things I found useful. For example, if you have to deal with a CEO who needs to let go, broken feels like failure. And you're already talking to most CEO founders have a bit of a, let's say, sensitive egos is not uncommon. And what I found is if you give them a way without loss of face to change, that usually works. So I've found that if you, instead of to them or in situations like that, not approach it as broken, but as what you have learned that was functional in the past is now no longer.
Mm-hmm.
I know, you guys familiar with the vanilla orchid?
It doesn't ring a bell to me. I don't know.
This is one of my favorite stories. So it's like one of the first like precursors to these groups that I've been a part of myself. It ended with a tour in a zoo where they took us along all kinds of jungle trees and plants and animals and talked about interesting lessons that you could take away from nature. And this one was the vanilla orchid lands on the bottom of the jungle floor as a seed. And it has a big problem because the canopy where the light is, which you kind of need as a plant, is pretty high up. So what it does, it actually uses its roots and a bit of a viney growth to hop a ride, to like hitch a ride on a jungle tree.
Huh.
It's really cool. But it also poses a problem because it is like a leafy plant. It doesn't have how do you call that? It doesn't have a trunk, so it cannot bring water up all the way. So when the tree grows, and we're talking 30 meters plus, at one point, physics is in the way. It can no longer push the water all the way from the ground up into its leaves. So what it does is it lets go of those roots that were essential to actually get where it's now. And I love that story because I think that's sometimes a good approach if you want to change something, whether you call it broken or no longer functional. It's in order to grow, you need to let things go. And this is one of my favorite stories.
I mean, that's you see that everywhere in responsive and adaptable products. Sometimes the thing that you've always been doing, like Lamborghini building tractors in the beginning, or Nokia doing something completely different, but you got to evolve into something that either matches your skills, matches the market, matches opportunity. But if you're always going to stick to something that you've known, and like the well-known argument, that's how we've always done business, you're going to run into yourself at some point.
Yeah.
And either you adapt or you die.
Yeah.
And I guess it's the same for this plant.
Yeah. So I'm curious. You guys see a lot of different companies and have colleagues that are in even more. I'm super curious, where do you think people have the most conflict? Because like the average listener here, what do you think they're running into most? Or
change resistance.
Yeah. And what is that? How does that start to exist?
The fear of letting go mostly and not knowing what's going to come. And also that is exacerbated by the fact that in many organizations and change processes, the emphasis is on change and not on the sense of continuity. So people feel like the whole world around them changes without thinking this is actually like there are minor tweaks that we're actually doing. Look now, what's happening right now with AI. AI is the biggest buzzword at the moment. Yeah. And there are things where there is definite change, and some people do lose their jobs. Because the job ceases to exist. However, you as a person don't cease to exist. So you can adapt with the skills that you have. And it's not that from today to tomorrow, the entire world is all of a sudden completely AI. No, we need to find those things where it's actually applicable and use that change to reconfigure our jobs now to do it more effective and more efficient. But if we're always just going to put the emphasis on AI is taking over all of our jobs, it's going to replace all of us, blah, 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 then it's going to be scary for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I'm curious, so when do you think change resistance moves away? What do you think is most important there?
I'm curious about your perspective as well, Jim.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do I see, helping with change resistance? Well, when you asked the last question about conflict, I think if I summed up the biggest source of conflict, maybe isn't the word I was thinking of, but resistance, stress, anxiety, whatever. I think that I would sum up in the world as being overwhelmed with options. Overwhelmed with options in competition for your eyeballs, your ears, books on your shelf, classes you could take, podcasts you could listen to, whatever.
This one.
This one, yeah. Just unsubscribe from every other one. But I do think that when you apply that to work, most of the paralyzing outcomes of change for people that I see is this competing equation of building the habits towards the things that I know I should be doing or want to do versus all the shit I have to do. And that's just another form of competition, right? Because all these things coming at every worker are competing for a finite capacity of their brain and their calendar. And yeah, I don't have a good solution for that. I see change management is being about habit building. And when you were talking about the root story, I was reminded of this week. I watched this cute little video. I think it was on Instagram of basically a guy who rescued an egg. He didn't even know what type of egg it was, and it ended up being a duck. And of all the things in the video that stood out to me was the egg was moving, and he's like, it's trying to break out. And he had to resist all of the urges to help the duck crack its own egg and emerge. And he said, no, but it's teaching itself. It's learning. It's evolving. I have to wait there. And he did. And that's good. Now, I'm not a duck expert. I would love to be. If anyone wants to hire me to be a duck expert, I'm in. But I have to think there's an analogous idea there to us saying like, there's so many times that client says, Jim, can you just tell us the right way? Or can you just do it for us? Or can you just set this up? I'm like, yeah, I can. But that's not scalable. It's not sustainable. And it's not in your long-term best interests.
What question were you answering, Jim?
Recently, I was answering two questions, I guess, which is how would we melt change resistance? And then I was going back because I couldn't get a word in because I was paying attention to the two of you answering this other challenge around conflict, I guess.
It's beautiful to see because I think this was a perfect demonstration. We are all literally like, I'm getting to know you all, and I think we're like, oh, there's some things we can share, right? And immediately we go into what can we put out, right? And I'm also happy. Thank you for the duck egg story, right? It's useful, but this is, I think, one of the things we are associative creatures, right? So immediately one thing leads to the next, and I think that the beauty of what Jim just did, right, from the how do you melt resistance, but wait, I also have that other thing to answer. This is like, there's zero judgment in this, just the observation. This happens to anyone who is listening to your story as well. So one of the things that I see in why do people resist change is a component is that they lose focus. And this is one of the reasons that I'm big on stories. Because if the focus is lost, and we were talking about growth, meaning that you have to let things go, I could reiterate the whole logical story. Because I'll say, hey, remember the vanilla orchid? Mm-hmm. Which we just added to the vocabulary. So I think part of change is also, one is we have to simplify sometimes. Because specifically in the types of companies I heard you work at, but I know I work at, just many software companies, we have so many good brains that we produce so much text, kind of like what can be annoying about ChatGPT, right? How is everyone producing so much text? And I think one part of the solution is to simplify. And I think change, if you simplify, that needs to answer one question. Because why would I want to change is the one thing that I see makes a difference. So it is, I love a speaker called Jim Rohn. You guys may be familiar with him. It's like one of the very old motivational speakers, you would call him maybe. But he says about behavior change, he says, if the promise is right, the price is easy. Mm-hmm. And I think very often at change, we're looking at the price, but we might forget the promise because it's so obvious to us.
I think it's that, but it's also, if it takes too long, it loses like the sense of incentive.
Yes.
And it drags on for too long. And yes, people lose focus, but it's also because they don't really feel that they're being incentivized to actually do the change because it takes so long to get to that prize, if you will.
Yeah, that's fair. And then what does it make? What makes that it takes too long? What do you think?
That could be many things, I guess. That could be not even knowing how long it is actually going to take. It's new emergent insights, changing the goalposts. It is our inability to actually adapt. It is that the change is a lot more painful, challenging than anticipated.
Yeah.
Like I can plan to do kickboxing, for instance.
Yeah.
It's like Mike Tyson's quote, everyone's tough until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Like it seems easy.
Yeah.
Like being really fast and to throw a couple of punches. Throwing punches is not that hard. I mean, it can be hard if you don't possess the right technique. But taking a hit in the face, that's such a different sensation. If you're not prepared for that, if you have never experienced that before, getting a full throttle punch in the face feels like you get hit by a brick or maybe even by a truck. So the whole different actual experience versus your expectation, that leads to people losing focus as well, I guess.
No, I as you talk about the kickboxing thing, I just remember the first time I went skydiving. You know, the fear was around the unknown and a lot of worry. The second time felt super different than me. I'm like checking my phone. I'm just kind of bantering. I remember we were talking about this online shopping site and all that stuff. Like, no way would I have had conversations like that the first time. So the first time you get hit in the face by somebody that as a fellow adult, I would have to think there's a very real shedding of anxiety there, like because the unknown now has become the known. And maybe you're like, yeah, I'm never doing that again. That was stupid. Or maybe it's like, yeah, okay, this isn't so bad. Like now I want to do this. So I just think that's an interesting. The fear of the unknown, I think, is just super common for all of us in many aspects of life.
Both Jim and I are experienced consultants and trainers. Therefore, we know how important it is for organizations to have the fundamentals in place before delivering high-value products. And this starts with understanding the theory behind whatever framework, method, or process organizations apply. And this is where Zebia comes in. Zebia is a pioneering software engineering and IT consultancy company, transforming and executing at the intersection of domain and technology to create digital leaders for our people, clients, partners, and communities. As a gift for our Mastering Agility audience, they provided us with a discount code MA10 when signing up for their open enrollment classes to get 10% off. Go to zebia.com/academy to find the entire curriculum of courses. That is Zebia, XEBIA.com/academy to find all their courses. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but if you go to a destination, whether that's to a new place on holiday or just to a general place you haven't been there before, the road there usually takes a lot longer perceptively.
Oh my God, yes. Like we just went from Amsterdam to Brussels a few weeks ago, and it felt like the trip back happened in an instant, but it felt like the trip there, navigating the 2 train stations and all that stuff, took hours and hours. It was on the clock exactly the same time. It was the mental perception of, I've done this before, even though it was only one time, like 8 hours earlier.
Yeah.
So what I think is, yes, perception, right? Any first time, that's how you also, you remember your first of almost everything, right? This is a thing. But I think underlying, there's a model there. And I've seen that there's just 2 forces, right? All the negative feelings can steer our behavior, all the ones. So fear, big one, right? Anxiety, but maybe also frustration. Anything that's a negative feeling, let's call it pain. And then you have anything that's a positive feeling. Let's call it pleasure. I think those are the 2 forces that steer every change. Even though you're making a rational decision, people use these. And disclaimer on models. I have studied psychology, and my core conclusion was, a model is better than no model, and no model is perfect. But with that in mind, I think I have a pretty cool model to share with anyone listening, maybe also you, because there's a couple of things about pain and pleasure. One, we do more, this is like very set in stone in science, to prevent pain than to gain pleasure. I would have loved for it to be different, but it is actually, it's been proven in many ways. Like getting 1,000 euros stolen from you feels different than gaining 1,000. They've done a classic experiment where they gave, I think it was Stanford alumni the cup, and it was like, you can trade now, and the people who randomly got a cup wanted a higher price than people who didn't have one would be willing to pay. This is a very so preventing pain, bigger than gaining pleasure. Then there's also default mode of your brain is to think, what pain and pleasure does it give me now?
Mm-hmm.
This is why you keep eating the apple pie even though you want to lose weight.
This sounds oddly familiar.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. It was, yeah. Don't want to go into that if you don't. But that's number one. But then number two, there's a model. It comes from Tony Robbins, who is very American coach, so not everyone's flavor. But I think this model is super solid. He says there's only 6 needs that everyone has that you can attribute these pain and pleasure things to. One is you want to know what's going to happen next. Certainty or stability, so knowing what's going to happen. Yeah. That's the one that we talked about just now, right? The first time you don't have the certainty about what is that road going to look like, and the second time you know it. But then if you have certainty all the time, you'll be bored crazy. The fun thing about this podcast, I don't know, but for you it might already be a bit less. But for me, it's variety, right? I haven't met Sander, I haven't met Jim. This is variety. I'm getting a ton of things that I haven't seen before, and I think that's also that's one of the number 2 of the 6. Number 3 is growth. People want to perceive that they're growing.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. They can just stand still, but as long as they perceive that they're growing, this is why sometimes a person that is stuck will be happy with the yearly salary increase. That can also be perceived as growth. It's a super subjective measure. Number 4 is significance. Does what I do matter? And then number 5 is connection. That you want to feel connected to others around you. And number 6 is contribution. And this is the fun part of why is it cool to give back, right? That's one of the needs I'm trying to serve now. I've no interest in the podcast other than connecting to people. That's number 1. But 2, also contributing. I hope some listener will have some of the quotes that are like, that's something I can apply in my job. That would be like mission success. Give me a great feeling, and this was a successful thing.
You got me already. I'm going to steal stuff from this episode. I'm pretty sure Jim will too.
I love it. Please, that's the best I can hope for. That's cool. Thanks. Fun test. You can actually ask people. Just explain, just as short as I did. These are the 6 needs. 0 being terrible, 10 being awesome. Where are you at?
Mm-hmm.
And this is fantastic. I've done this. I was during COVID. I was at Interim in an agile coach role with another agile coach, and we used this as a predictor who was gonna have some problems, yes or no. Both leaving was easy to predict because if we saw someone drop with at least 2 of these, we know, a couple of months from now they're gonna leave. And if we didn't fix it, it indeed came true. I've advised this to many companies, and they just used it, and they could say, whoa, I really prevented someone leaving that I didn't see coming because it wasn't the things that I don't usually measure.
Mm-hmm.
So big tip, maybe you can literally use this, not only as this is a cool model, but ask people about where are you on, what sense of stability do you have, what sense of variety, growth, connection.
Yeah. And I think it's coming back to the Stanford, I think it was a Stanford research, another one, maybe a different university, doesn't really matter. But it's also the compensation of loss, or like the price of loss. If you had $10 and you would lose that, it would take $30 to get rid of or to compensate that sense of loss instead of, hey, here you already have $10, here's another 20.
Yeah.
So even if you would have lost and you gained the same amount, having $10 and just getting 20 is net more value in the feeling wise than losing something and getting the same amount back.
Yeah.
So there should be an incentive for people to actually change because they're losing a part of themselves or their job, and that change should actually compensate for that loss.
Yeah. It's the perceived danger. Wasn't it Mark Twain just pushing out one more quote? I'm an old man now and I've had many troubles, most of which never happened.
Yeah, I think what you're, just for the audience, I think what we're all talking about is what's called loss aversion bias. And it's the overvaluation of loss compared to commensurate gain. And I felt it in the last 24 hours. And it's interesting because I think there was cultural differences to it as well. And I think there's caste system differences. There's all types of differences. But one thing I've learned is people who grew up without a lot have a much stronger loss aversion bias than people who grew up more comfortably or more privileged. And I think the other thing is, and I don't know if there's an official term for this, but it's basically I would call it or describe it as like replacement effort or replacement value. And we were talking on a recent episode, Martin, about do people's behaviors change in a market way if in the current state of the economy and the job climate? Because you might do something different with your mastermind group or your client if you knew that you could make 3 phone calls and replace that work if they decided to fire you because they didn't like what you said, or if they just stopped paying your subscription or whatever. But if you feel that, holy crap, tonight I got to go to this mastermind group of all these business leaders, and if I lose 2 of them, I may have to go back to the drawing board on how I pay my bills, how I live my life, et cetera. Like you may do something different, whether you even realize it or not.
Yeah. So there was, again, 2 things to unpack. One, you said maybe there's also a bigger or smaller perception of loss aversion depending on how you were raised. But I think there's also still character. So I'm a strong believer of a mix of those 2, because you can, human beings can be very diverse, whatever background they have. So I just want to asterisk that first part. So emphatically disagree partly. And then the second part, what I think is the weapon against that feeling. Because if you're worried about, if I lose this job, will I get another one? Maybe that starts, but I hope this will be a positive pain for people to experience. Maybe that starts with, that is a bit of an uncertainty about yourself that you're showing, I think. Because I've seen in bad markets people thrive, and in good markets people can still fail. So I think maybe a perception like that, it says something about yourself, which is why I'm like a huge advocate of proper coaches or proper mentors, maybe also split the 2 roles, because fear is always a bad advisor, right? The feeling, maybe I do need to change my values to match the economic climate, is something that I immediately would go against. But that maybe is also because I'm super confident in that my values will bring me stability, right? And all the stuff that we talked about with the 6 human needs. Do you get what I'm saying?
It's my turn to tell you I passionately and friendly disagree with you, because I believe Daniel Kahneman would say that fear is a really good mentor at times, right?
That's fair. Yeah.
Quick thinking, heuristics. I think there's a lion over there. I'm not going to run in that. But I do think the point you're making is valid, right? I'm just, in a joking way, jabbing you a little. But I think making every decision based on fear, stupid thing. But survival-based decisions based on rapid thinking and heuristics are probably based on fear a lot.
Absolutely. Don't measure the teeth of the tiger first.
Right.
No.
Right.
I agree. I agree on the quick thinking is super useful, but I do believe that when it comes to a job, right, that is a bigger decision, and it can always jump into the conscious, that system too, right? Am I getting it? Was some time ago, Kahneman.
Yeah. And the problem is many of us don't know when we're about to be faced with one of those decisions. Like the very next meeting I have on my calendar after you and the 3 of us hang up could be fraught with fear-based decision-making. I don't know. I don't think so, but it could be.
Yeah. But then it's still useful, I think, to find that. That's, by the way, so I do some transitions, right? The peer groups, I reduced even the amount of peer groups. I said, look, I'm going to have less capacity because then I have a couple of companies that I can help out also, because then maybe their CTOs in one and their CPOs in one. It doesn't make sense to waste all that knowledge that I have on a company. But I see very often that one of the things that is, so you guys talk a lot about psychological safety as well, right? It's a super important concept. Or Jim goes a bit like, yeah. Okay.
He's American. Don't blame him.
I'm just tired of talking about it so much. But of course, it's a great thing. Of course, it's good. Yes.
So what I believe is sometimes you can also lose what healthy conflict is. And what I often do as the outsider, and then maybe you guys recognize this, is have the talks that the manager is just not having for fear reasons of this brilliant jerk leaving, maybe. We all have these developers that are brilliant code-wise, and they're the only one who knows how that old Cobalt stuff still works. But you still need to have a talk when they're unpurposely, usually not with that intention, but bullying other team members. Or if there's a talent who is in product management and who read a couple of books there and now thinks, I'm going to go all in, but doesn't see that they might be going faster than the company can cope with. Yeah. And I think a lot of the conversations I have are also the ones that maybe leaders could have already had if they wouldn't have the fear of damaging the relationship too much. So I think fear of a confrontation in work is usually the wrong reason. So do be political. Don't be stupid. But I think as long as people are smart about this, there's a lot you can say, and more often than not. So if this is something you are holding back because you think maybe my boss will look negative after this, usually just giving that as a disclaimer, be like, hey, I'm a bit uncomfortable going to say this, but I have a piece of frustration that I need to share that works. But the other way around, you can also say like, hey, I'm your boss and I don't want you to feel very terrible about this, but I want to have this conversation because there's some friction.
Do you think there's often a mix-up in perception of what psychological safety is about? That is, many people perceive that to be that everything should always be kumbaya and everyone should feel super comfortable. No, feeling like shit sometimes it's part of life, right? And you should be comfortable feeling like shit at that moment, knowing that if we make this constructive, we can get out of this as well. And it doesn't mean that even though I feel shit right now, I am shit. Exactly. Like those are two vastly different topics, and I think those do get mixed up a lot.
Yep. Embrace the suck is the phrase that comes to mind.
Tropic Thunder, was it?
I don't know. I mean, that's not where I attribute it to, but now you have me second guessing myself. But one of the other things around this, just what you just said, Sunder, is many times I've been at a physical table in a war room mentality, right? Like when the shit's hitting the fan and I get the message, hey, go get to the 7th floor in this room, bring your laptop, likely you're going to be there all day. Sometimes I've been there all week, but almost without fail, at some point in the midst of the suck, somebody turns to me and like, wouldn't it be cool if we could work like this all the time? I'm like, why? And the first few times I heard it, I was very surprised. But now it doesn't surprise me anymore because what they normally mean is we have focus, we have a singular goal, we're sitting at the same physical or virtual table. We have access to rapid decision making and all these other things. I'm like, yeah, I think that's a good reflection. But then we go back to our normal workday desk and the stress and urgency of that is gone. And we immediately fall back into our old habits of, even though it was just yesterday, we said, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? And there was literally nothing preventing us from approaching the next day the same way.
Mastering Agility only partners with organizations aligned with our values, and that's exactly why we're excited to work with our sponsor, Scrum Match. Scrum Match is a recruiting platform created for and run by true Scrum Masters and product owners. On Scrum Match, true Scrum Masters and product owners get hired by companies serious about creating more value faster using professional Scrum and product ownership. Right now, they're hiring for a client with exciting Scrum Master vacancies in Paris and Lyon, France. In this role, you'll coach cross-functional teams to deliver cutting-edge digital products, leveraging Agile, data analytics, AI, and lean UX. Enjoy a hybrid work model, a competitive salary, and the opportunity to thrive in a collaborative, innovative environment. Are you interested? Sign up on Scrum Match and sprint toward your dream job on scrummatch.com.
Yeah, but that's usually in my experience, and maybe you have a completely different experience because people lose the burning platform. Like there is no very hard pressing incentive that we should keep on working this way, because it's to many people it's mentally very draining, very energy consuming, and they lose the mental capacity to actually do stuff like that. And if we keep on going like this, we won't lose anything, right?
I think
until you do.
Okay, interesting. So what I think is, it's always curious if somebody says, wouldn't it be great to work like that all the time? My immediate question was, what ingredient is the thing you're missing? Because you're going to figure out, it's a very different one if it's like, because decision making is never this fast. Because then I would immediately go like a little bit solution mode, but I would go like, who in leadership is actually aware of what a decision is? And if we just tease a little bit on the semantics, which you shouldn't do all the time, is there a process? Are decisions being made even? And what are the rules of overturning a decision? Do we even know that there's just 3 ways, right? There's one hierarchical, this is just what the boss says. 2 is a form of voting, and 3 is everyone has to agree. If you don't define which of the 3 you're using, most people are going to expect consensus, which is just impractical.
Yeah.
And in stress, they accept hierarchical, but they also accept hierarchical if you say, look, I'm going to listen to all your opinions, and then I'm going to make the call. That's super nice. I mean, I would like that if a boss says that to me. I'm like, okay, fair. I'm going to try my best to put the right things on the table. But that would be if it's decision making. If it is people are not together, we have a whole different conversation, right, Jim? So can we dive into this example? What do you think, like the last time somebody said this, what were they missing?
Yeah, I mean, and I know in their case what the answer is, because I asked him. I'm like, what is it about it? Is it the free food? Is it this? And it really came down to 2 things. It came down to all the bureaucracy and red tape of doing anything is cut away. Like you asked for something and nobody says, oh, here's a link to ServiceNow. Go fill out this ticket, and in 7 to 10 days we'll meet our SLA. Okay, so it's the removal of bureaucracy in the spirit of getting the right work done as quickly as possible. And it's the elimination of dependencies, because the people you need are 10, 20 feet away from you most of the time, either physically or digitally. And those are those are the most common answers I get when I ask people to think about what is it about. There to your point though, there is a group of those people who have told me it's honestly like the free pizza and donuts, or it's the fact that because I'm in the suck right now, I'm going to get some comp days off that I can spend doing whatever it is I want to do. But I would say those are the exception. That the more majority type answers are the first 2 things.
Also, are those kind of environments sustainable, like stress wise? I don't think so.
It's sorry, I'm a model person. Again, the disclaimer: no model is perfect, but here I use Yerkes Dodson. You familiar with Yerkes Dodson law?
No.
Okay, I'm just going to give you some. So, do we have a camera that can see things that I draw? No, too bad. Okay, I'll put it.
Yeah,
there's
just hold it up to your camera in a minute.
I'll do it like that. Yeah. So, if on the y-axis there is performance, and then on the x-axis there is stress. It used to be, so maybe I should also draw that one. Actually, can I see myself? Okay, am I mirrored or no? So usually in factories, the more you put pressure, so pressure or anxiety or stress on people, the higher the performance until a certain plateau, and then you have like the max, and people are working at their max speed. What Yerkes and Dodson, put that in the show notes, actually figured out is that for complex tasks, it's more like, do we got it? I don't know. Jim can see it. Is it okay? So it's more like that. And it's actually, there's bore out on one end and burnout on the other hand. If we just very, very radically talk about this, Yerkes and Dodson wouldn't agree that that's the 2 things. But this is the behavior of performance. And one of the things that I think is healthy to ask is, where's this person and where is this team? Because I see teams on both ends here, right? I see teams who are underperforming because there's too much stress, and I see teams that are underperforming because there's too low stress. If you take it one granularity level down, even in a team, some can be super relaxed while the other is stressed out. And I think this is a leadership question you should always be like thinking about, talking about. If you run one team, another great one, after you've done the 6 human needs, right? Go do this and draw this and ask someone to point, where are you at? not as a you're doing it right or wrong, but should I be helping you like chill to perform better, or should I help you put the pressure on to deliver? Because that's very different, because most leaders have only one style. They have either the I stress you out or the I relax you.
And I think in this case it's very important to emphasize the difference between management and leadership.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've been talking about this on this podcast for a million years, and we've kind of chewed it out. But I'm curious about your perspectives as well.
So I think that if we talk about, I could talk about it for hours, but also don't want to get bogged down into the semantics on the other hand. So let me just say a great leader helps others perform. That's my vision. But you don't even have to be hierarchically the manager. It doesn't always work like that.
Exactly.
So I think that this is where some companies have a couple of people on their org chart who are excellent managers and take care of that, which is fantastic. And then they have a set of leaders that do the leading. And I think if we dive into tech, right, there's so many different flavors of Scrum Masters and tech leads, right? And I've seen the ones where tech leads are just the ones that are like the most knowledgeable developer, and I've seen the one where they are actually leading, and then maybe you don't even need a Scrum Master for a concept, right? But I've also seen the other way around. I've seen that there were Scrum Masters that were basically just managing, not leading, and maybe even religious about their models, which would be
the Scrum police.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's when you get Agile is That posts on LinkedIn, right? Because it's just, look, this process. We have this process to solve the problem that we had too much process in the past. Like,
yeah. The problem with that is something cannot die if it never truly lived, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
And that's the thing that is something that companies don't really grasp. Like, we have never actually attempted to make this thing thrive and live, and therefore we cannot kill it either.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. So for me, a leader is someone who gets results, but also by making others shine. And I think there's a different flavor from leader and manager when we look at founder. Because so I think the difference between the client groups that we work with, I'm mostly in scale-ups. So most of them are between 100 and 500 employees. That's like my specific niche that I think I excel in Europe-wide, which means you often still have a founder on board. Who is a weird extra flavor because they don't fit this typical concept. There's different flavors of founders as well, but then they have this very special thing that they're also often the ultimate mentor in a way, because their role when the vanilla orchid was lower down the tree was actually to have all the answers, and now in scale-up mode, that's no longer their role. They need to enable others. So I think that's an extra flavor that needs to be added, but that's specifically in scale-ups. There is a third. I don't have a name for it yet. And I don't think founder covers it, because I've also seen it in the, no name-dropping companies, in the bigger financial institutions I've worked with.
So if there's no name for it yet, what is like the pattern? Like, what is it that they do?
Yeah. So what I think doesn't come from the model of leadership manager is who is gonna be the one that brings the knowledge, and that is kind of the living wiki, because you always have that, right? It's never just in the onboarding, you read the wiki once and you understand the company. There's always so many things. So I think that's the role that I'm kind of missing. I think the history maybe of the company, but also the oracle who knows about these are things that we tried in the past, and they're not necessarily logged, but this is a piece of knowledge that we have. I think, and they can be in many companies, but I think they are essential in the learning curve for the whole organization.
So basically a provider of knowledge, etc.
And doesn't need to be a founder, right? Because I also find these. So many IT companies have the brilliant jerk, right? Whether it is a hired consultant from a BI company that has very niche specific knowledge about this, and they cannot get rid of because then their systems would die, or it is that one developer that's there for 15 years but it's really hard to work with. But I mean, we know these types, but they're essential in that role very often. So what I do in transformation is actually make that role more formal and give them like an out for that knowledge as well. And be like, hey, look, we have a couple of rituals, but I also see we need to have a ritual where we can kind of harvest your knowledge. And you both give them a little bit of an ego boost, but also a lot of the time that jerk behavior of the brilliant jerks comes from, no, you're just going to fuck it up. But if you're going to give them an out to tell them how not to fuck up, if they have the capacity, not everyone can, but I see very often if you tell them, look, we need to teach people to think a little bit more like you, not copy of you, so that's not what we're aiming for, but we kind of need to know these, I don't know, dependencies, or we kind of need to know this 10 experiments that we ran in the past, or the things where a previous transformation didn't work. So I try to give them like a place to dump that knowledge. Yeah, that I think is the third role, but because I do think it has to do with leading and managing, but it's not the same, right?
It's definitely not the same, and I'm sure Jim can actually attest to that. We've been working with these kind of situations over and over. Now, before we actually start moving to the closing, I'm very curious. You've worked with a lot of product leaders, CPOs, you already mentioned, CTOs, CIOs, et cetera, et cetera. What are the main things you've learned from these kind of people? Like, is there a recurring thing that you should do or you should avoid?
Okay. Okay, so talking to so many people in leadership positions, whether it's product or tech, in trusted environments with very different cases on the one hand, but also very common cases. I wrote this down just to make sure that I have it, but there is how we usually work. There's a round table where a person can share a challenge, and then there's a deep dive case. And if I would summarize all of that without putting private things into ChatGPT, I think it's going to end up with, if you say, if we summarize all of it, it would be the people stuff is hard.
It is.
I think I might actually, if I ever write a book, I think I will write the book, The People Stuff is Hard. You heard it here first, folks. But it's conflict. Either they have too much conflict or they're conflict avoidant, even though they're a leader. It is communication. They don't see that, what do you think, is very different than what do you think?
The framing is of essential importance.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, of course, we have a stereotype in our head when we think CTO, who has been around for 10 years, or CPO, who has been around for 10 years, but both can have this, right?
Yeah.
And then the third is, I would say, the category of ego problems, which is either too little ego, not speaking up and sharing essential knowledge when they should. Other is too much and therefore no longer hearing the feedback from the organization. The fourth is, and that I think will speak to your hearts, I think a lot of leaders don't spend enough time investing in helping their people continuously grow. And you'd be surprised how often the advice from either a group or me has been, how about you do a self-development hour Friday, an hour before lunch? And the results that I get back from people who implement this is another like thing you can do like tomorrow. That's the best hour your expensive people are going to spend. If you want to force multiply it, by the way, one of my participants, I think this was already 2 years ago, came with the idea at the end of the self-study hour where everyone works on their own stuff. We have a mini stand-up where it is not a stand-up, what did you do, but what did you learn and how are you going to apply it? How can others apply it? I think that's lovely. It's like it turns it's like book club on steroids.
Well, yeah, this is something that really resonates with me and why. And this is a plug into this company, but I don't mean it as such. But I actually did this post yesterday on LinkedIn. This company, like Xavier, provides me with so many opportunities to develop myself, to have Jim in this podcast as well. He was in this studio a couple of weeks ago, but also to speak at conference. They help me grow in that sense. They help me hone my craft in the stuff that I'm doing. It's not just here, push out your stuff and make as much revenue as possible. But they have to trust, like you have the skills and the capacity to actually do this, and let us amplify those skills that you have in order to have you do personal growth or to create your personal growth. And in return, hopefully you'll get that back to us as well. And that trust and like the space for personal development really pays dividends.
You want to know what F word I really hate? Is feel. Because I saw Sunder's post on LinkedIn and it looked great. But what I hear a lot is somebody will talk to me about like, oh, my company sucks. I got to do this paperwork and this bureaucracy, and I can't even get this training class approved and all this. And when I ask them a coaching or mentor type question about, well, what are the things they're doing well? Is there anything they're doing well? How have they done this? Oh, stop gaslighting me. Stop trying to change my reality. Well, you're such an asshole. Like, how dare you ask me to be reflective on the other side of that coin before jumping to a conclusion? Or how dare you challenge my feelings? Cool, man. I get it. I'm guilty of that too.
You want to have my advice on this, Jim?
Please, man. Like, coach me up.
Yeah. So if this happens to you, your relationship with the person is not at the place that you need it to be first, because this comes from pedagogy. No education without relation. And I've had this so many times. So I think you and me, I can guess most of the books in that bookshelf behind you because I read all those stuff as well. And then I talk to people, I'm like, why didn't they read this? But if that's the energy they can even sense, even though you're trying not to show, they'll be like, oh yeah, who are you, right? So at one point I needed to shift away from teacher mode, which I hope I wasn't too much, but I'm trying to give value in this podcast. But in conversations like that, I had a lot of those, so that's why I want to talk about this. I had so many of those, like when I was still a founder and before. But then at one point, a good coach said to me, really, really take into heart, seek first to understand, then to be understood in these one-on-ones. Because in the one-on-ones, I would be so happy trying to share and coach that I forgot to listen to the person first.
Yep.
Even though the person is going to say some things you already guessed correctly, because I can see in your fast brain, you're probably going to be able to guess those next two sentences, but that doesn't mean they don't still need to say them. Sorry, is it useful? Because
it is, and that really brings back also the fearless organization from Amy Edmondson, where she describes. And that's one of my key takeaways is if we want to have a culture of speaking up, we need to create a culture of listening first. And I think that's a step that many organizations forget to actually really ingrain. And they just tell other people, you should just speak up if there's something, or if you feel not okay. Like if there's something on your mind, you should speak up. Yeah, cool. But if I don't think that you're going to listen to it, I'm not going to speak up.
Yeah, no, fair. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The phrase that I've used in the past is no coaching without invitation. And I get it that it is very relational in that. But I mean, I even feel it with family and friends. I even feel it with, like the two of us have talked about this and all that. And it doesn't go as poorly as my other example, but I do think there's fast responders and there's slow responders. And there's a lot of people whose initial thought to even when you have the right foundational relationship with that person, their initial response is, stop gaslighting me, stop trying to push your opinions on me, or how dare you make me think critically about things. And then 2 days later, you hear your words or ideas or challenges coming out of their mouth to others or to themselves, or they come back to you and say, I really thought about what you said, and A, B, C, right? There are other people that just never even get there. And either we could guess as to why that is, et cetera. And so it's a real phenomenon. And I love your idea, your reminder of first seek to understand. And one time in a 27 plus year career, have I gotten training from an employer on anything even remotely like that. And I think that is the sad reality is one time in 27 years did someone invest in a group of us to say, let's teach people how to listen. Let's teach people how to have good conflict. Let's teach people how to ask only open-ended questions. And I think that's the type of thing that we need more of. And when I talk to my training expert buddies and all that, it's actually getting worse. It's going away. Companies are slashing budgets. They're not training there. They're training via TikTok and social media. So I worry as an industry, the window is shutting quickly on the even the opportunity to do that more with a whole generation of a workforce.
until people realize how bad of a way to consume knowledge this is, and actually to put this into practice. Because it's very easy to just zombie out, and look at doom scrolling kind of videos and these 7 seconds. I cannot really consume anything kind of videos. But then to put that into practice, that's a whole different thing.
I want to just respond with 2-3 things. I think so. First, yes, of course, 7 seconds. What the? And there's a whole dopamine. That's another episode, which I would love to have.
I mean, 7 seconds, marathon runners.
Yeah. But Jim, I think in one of my CFO groups, there was one of the cases was the numbers are shit and the founders are denying it, or the CEO is denying it. And I'd be very honest, this didn't happen once in a CFO group, and it also didn't happen just in one country. So this is a theme that CFOs need to worry with. But luckily, the first time it came up, we had a very senior person there who had this little question that he would then ask. He would be like, do you want me to be the CFO that tells you what you want to hear? Or do you want me to be the CFO that tells you what you need to hear? And it's super direct, and it's maybe a little bit too aggressive. But I think the core concept of the question, I'm at the crossroads, I'm fine by either. Mm-hmm. That could also help in these scenarios where you think somebody is gonna benefit from a coaching question. Because I've literally, let's just say within the last month, had a couple of very direct, not pleasant conversations for people. But I started with intent, started saying, look, I see some things, or let's use another example. I sent a cold email to a CTO of a very well-known company here in the Netherlands because I heard in the market and in the peer groups that no one wanted to work for that company anymore. It's pretty shitty, right? I could have said, what a shitty company, maybe you should have a talk. But I went, if I heard this, I can assume this is something you're lying awake from. Do you want to have a chat about this? And then he said yes. And we had a very good conversation. But I think the how you bring reflective and terrible news is so essential. So, okay, one more example. I did an assessment of a company where my conclusion was, oh my God, I've never seen such a mess. No one's gonna want to hear that, right? So I started with the disclaimer saying, with assessments, sometimes when I do this, I find some things that I'm really shocked by. But the worst outcome that could happen is that then the people don't hear it. So I want to reiterate before we start, my intent here is to give you an honest perspective, and the assessment is over. So I have no interest other than giving you good information. The best outcome is that you would be open to this. You can guess which stance a person is going to take if you give them this as options, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to try to, okay, but let's squeeze this guy for his value and listen. And then we could talk about this is shit, right?
Yeah, but it was setting people up into taking a decision. So we had an episode, or Jim had an episode, because I unfortunately was there, on nudging people.
Oh, yeah, I listened to that, yeah.
Right, Phil Agnew was in the podcast, and he was like, this really makes me feel about nudging.
Yeah.
It's you nudge people into a direction that you think this is the direction you should take because of the way that you frame things. Because by sentiment, they're going to pick one option or the other.
Okay. But it has to be authentic.
Oh,
because people will smell. That's the one. So the problem I have with nudging is that it can feel like you're. I have a couple of problems with it. Let's not go into the full of night. I love the book, but also one of my friends wrote his philosophy a thesis on this, so I dove into the subject way more than I should have. But I think all of this, so all the things where you do behavior change, it only works when you're authentic. Otherwise, it A, won't work, and B, you're just a jerk, right? So I think that's maybe what I tried to say before, is the setting the intent, because I can imagine if a Jim or a Martijn just without any disclaimer starts giving you things that are of value, you might be blown away because it's not your standard. So setting some sort of intent or disclaimer might lead to them giving permission or not. That's the thing. And then lastly, tiny, I wasn't planning on this, but I started doing conferences earlier this year. I had Marty Kagan over. It was amazing. It was product mastery, 150 people. We co-created it. One of the things, so it was really hard to, you had Marty Kagan. It was really hard to book him. And it was a bit of it took 20 emails, let's just say that. And at the end of the conference, he sent me a very nice email saying, I was a bit harsh because I get asked for a lot of conferences that are done by people who don't care. And I just saw that you guys do. And I hope that in this podcast came across that I care about also this audience, that we try to give value and value and value. And I want to tell you that we are setting up a unconference for leadership in tech. So when Jim said there was not enough, we are in that process. So if there's anyone who's happy, and I would also love to get your input, what we are going to do next is have a co-creation forum, also to test if people want this, where people can give their input on, hey, if we're talking about leadership in tech, these are the topics I would be interested in. No AI talks, no sponsors, no. So I'm not soliciting Xebia sponsorship, absolutely not. That's how no sponsors, very intimate, small, and created by the participants. So perhaps some of the people in the listening would also like to contribute there.
Can they already submit? Like, where if they want to know more, if they want to provide input, where should they go?
So the best thing to do right now is just LinkedIn /in/my last name, which is VERSTEEG, and just either send me a message, Mastering Agility, or just send me a connection request, and we'll ask, hey, do you want to be involved with co-creating that conference? Which is it is a form, but I've done this before. If you do that, it's just going to be way more a match with everyone who's joining. It's a different style of. We're not presenting the program. We're actually crowdsourcing.
Nice.
Yeah.
So for all of you who are listening, feel invited.
Nice.
Sounds awesome. Let's start wrapping this one up. Jamie, can you pull up the ChatGPT question of the day? And by the way, awesome idea of the conference. And I know Marty Kagan, he can be very harsh, but he's a very knowledgeable guy, and I really loved having him on the podcast. Yeah. So if you haven't listened to the episode yet, please do. Yeah. So the question of the day is, can you share a time when a product decision you made went against the data, but turned out to be the right call?
Okay. So one problem I always have with questions that try to shine a positive light, right, is that it can be a bit ego boosting. So I'm going to challenge ChatGPT to maybe go the other way around. Is that okay? Where the data said yes, but it was just a no. When I had my education technology company, so I'm just going to this was a more practicing time in product. All our teachers were saying, we need more forms of, so let me just very shortly, what was the product? You can see it as a CMS for digital content for students of high schools, where teachers could adjust to the level of the student. So they could add questions, or they could maybe say, oh, Jimmy missed something in English last year. So we're gonna, We had an editor for teachers, and they just said to us, Luke, we don't have enough options there. And it was, we then asked, we did a lot of surveys, so all the data, it was qualitative, I must say, pointed into the direction more features, and it was totally wrong because each new thing that we built wasn't used. And it really taught me a lot about the need of discovery. And if you want a great book on that, Continuous Discovery, if you haven't read it already, or if you have read it, reread it, because this is one of those books you can just always get value from.
Or listen to the podcast with Teresa.
With Teresa, yes,
exactly.
I saw that. Yeah. Nice. So she's also
but it's there's this is a lot about validation in the corner, like the area of validation. And I think that's in my upcoming book that I'm writing with Ryan Brook, again, the co-author of our first book, Solving for Value. We're now working on the anatomy of a product, and that's where, nice plug, but where we're talking about validation is basically a Venn diagram of 3 different areas. One is data and metrics, like the ones that you're describing. We need that to have some objectivity, if you will. Interviews and conversations with people, and observations. Yeah. And if you lack either of these, the validation is not necessarily very synthesized. Yeah. So even if the data says this is the right thing, like people are using this, even if you talk to people and they say, yeah, we're using this and it's great, but they still have one big piece of frustration on their face while they're interacting with it, and but you don't observe that, you miss a critical component of your validation.
Yeah. Did you have Rory Sutherland on the podcast already?
No, but I tried to get him.
Oh man! So I think he might add perspective to your concept as well, because from his book Alchemy, one of the things that stuck was sometimes the opposite of a good idea is also a good idea.
Yeah.
Which I think that's one of the things I haven't been able to fit into any model, but it also makes sense. So if you can incorporate that concept.
Yeah, yes, I actually am. So now I'm going to dive into a small tangent and promote my own upcoming stuff. But I've been working on Discovery Tactics.
Yeah.
And that's a card deck that kind of leads into these kind of things. So there are 72 different cards that are tweaks of this. Like it's, for instance, one like this. While you're doing your discovery work or you're creating a prototype with Claude or whatever, just pull out one of those cards, and it could be do the exact opposite of what you're doing right now, or write a eulogy for your project. So think about, at the end, if this is the end of our product, what do we want it to have achieved by then, and start reverse engineering from that point. So there's a whole lot of these kind of things coming up that really dives into this. But my co-author, Ryan, he's a massive fan of Rory Sutherland as well. So he has been convincing me to get him on, and I've been messaging him, but so far no success yet.
Yeah, make it happen, because he's on my short list as well. I love Rory's stuff. He's been on the Nudge podcast and at least a few times, and that's where I think I was first exposed to him.
Nice. All right, do you want to start heading up?
I have one thing that I just want to give everyone that is listening, because you already have a pile of books that you have heard referenced and that you are adding to that list, maybe based on what we talked about, because I found out there's not one book nerd, but there's 3 book nerds on this podcast. I have a very personal question for the listeners, and that is, please, please, please don't wait until you have all the answers, because it will never be true. Even if you have one thing that you read and you're going to apply it today, that is worth 10 times than reading 3 more books. So this is just one of the pitfalls. There was a lot. Please don't try to implement all of it, but pick one and just do it, because it would be so sad if you were like, oh, I got a lot, and then this, I don't know if you made notes while listening to this, but if it lands in a drawer, that would be like, I would cry a little. So if you can just pick one thing, that would be fantastic.
Just try, see what happens, retaliate based on whatever.
And let us know, by the way, because I think you, Jim, me, we would all like if you got any of our stuff and it didn't or it did work, just let us know, right? Because that's fun. Yeah.
Jim, any last remarks from your side?
No, I mean, we could talk for another few hours, right?
Let's do it.
But this was great. Thank you. It was wonderful meeting you. Enjoy the rest of the day and the beautiful spring week wherever you may be.
Lovely.
All right. Appreciate you for joining, and appreciate everyone for tuning into this episode of the Mastering Agility podcast, and see you soon.
That is all for today. Thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, let us know by hitting that like button. Share it with friends and colleagues, sharing a message on LinkedIn, joining our warm and welcoming Discord community, or attend recordings as a virtual audience. You can find all the relevant links in the show notes. We hope you'll tune back in for the next episode of the Mastering Agility podcast.